Hi, this is Laptop Radio. Today's topic is, can AI make us more human? We have Nicole Buttner-Thiel on the call, and she's an entrepreneur, economist, and data enthusiast. Hello, Nicole.
Hi, Michelle.
How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. It's very excited. And I know that you're located somewhere in the world.
I'm in Berlin today.
Awesome, awesome. So, Nicole, what is your story?
So I basically trained as an economist and econometrician at university. I spent some time also in Stanford, so I'm always happy to reconnect to the Bay Area. Spent some time in the econ department there. And I very much had a training as a sort of traditional data person in the sense, like traditional regression and modeling and so on. It's more old world data work, so to speak. I then went on to have a career in finance. I joined a hedge fund basically for my first 4 years. I worked very quantitatively and then reverted back to a sort of Stanford orbit and worked for one of my former professors, Paul Milgram, in an auction, high stakes auction company that he has. And there we basically built tech, we did consulting, we advised governments and Fortune 500 companies globally. And that was kind of like when I obviously was totally infused with tech and also had my first touch points with real machine learning and knew I wanted to build something in that area. And then I basically became an entrepreneur and started my own company in this area. And I'm now basically heading an AI business out of Berlin at MerantixLABS. So yeah, now joining sort of this old world data view with more what the cutting edge of machine learning and technology and building AI solutions for our clients, and I'm very excited.
So when we speak about AI, what do you mean? What is AI?
Yeah, I think that's already one of the key problems, right? Whenever I go to conference and then, it's like, oh, talk about AI today and tomorrow and the future and everything. I feel that there are at least two problems with that. It's like, it's a very badly defined term. And so I feel often when people talk about it, it's kind of like somewhere between science and science fiction. And that's obviously quite hard. So I prefer to talk like more about machine learning, and like a range of algorithms that kind of learn and become better with kind of growing data sets, and now with deep learning can take various formats of data and kind of produce various outputs from voice to text and pictures. So further away from the more structured sort of Excel-like data we were used to working with, only a decade ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when people talk about AI, they sometimes they have it in different categories. Machine learning, you have data systems, you have NLP, which is kind of more like a language, like Alexa and voice driven. But when there seems to be a fear in the world today that AI will take over us and our jobs. I mean, do you think that's possible, or do you think that's true?
So I think, and we're already seeing it. So I think it's to some extent it's a reality, but I think we need to be careful, right? I mean, when AI was born, it was this dream to kind of mimic human cognitive abilities, right? So to create machines that were as intelligent as humans and could sort of conduct more complex problem-solving type activities. And I think we're seeing, some of this. We're seeing some of this today. So, would I say, can you replace, or like a complex problem-solving job today with just an algorithm? I would say no. We're not at that Skynet, all superhuman robot algorithm yet. But in very specific fields, I would say, a task of like computer vision, can it make a radiologist more effective? Yes, absolutely. Can it help optimize complex production processes? Yes, absolutely. So there are certain, maybe more tasks, right? Maybe I would divide into tasks and jobs. So I would say yes, a large part of the tasks that we currently carry out can be automated, can be done and taken over by algorithms, but that doesn't mean that it will replace, full-on jobs. Because I don't know, think about your job, I think about mine. There are some repetitive, dull things that I do that I would very much like to be automated away. Working on it every day. But it's going to be like a further stretch to completely take over all my tasks, and then that would be my whole job, just with an algorithm. Just because there's always new stuff popping up, and more complex things I can then deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like AI complement us in a way, and I think that's a good thing. And yet, there's AI that spies on us, right? I'm mentioning surveillance. We're in 1984. I just feel like the Big Brother is watching, and sometimes it's for security and safety, right? Because you want to make sure that the citizens are safe and there's no danger. However, what is the line between privacy and public safety?
Ah, Michelle, that's a very fine line that we're walking there. I think very clearly there are different geographies that take a different stance on it, and there's even us as users, we're not maybe completely consistent, right, in our behavior. So on the one hand, we don't want some tech companies to know all about us, to be able to analyze us, but sort of by using certain services and the convenience of those services, I'm completely guilty as charged on that. Still that's sort of I'm enabling this, right? So I think we also have to be honest about how we like to live, and then what that means on the technology side, but like what that means also for companies to be able to provide these services. But I think it's an important discussion to when we maybe move more towards the realm of the public sector, right? This is private companies and what services they offer in return for data we give them about ourselves, about our purchasing behavior.
Mhm.
But when we think of states, there I think especially I'm German, right, by nationality, and we have obviously we have a very radical experience in our history, in recent history. And if you think about what would have been possible, if you had surveillance, highly sophisticated surveillance algorithms with a sort of fascist agenda, right? That becomes scary very quickly.
Mhm.
And so, me personally, and I would say, maybe that's also something more ingrained in our country, many countries' history, is sort of a cautiousness, as to the powers of the state using very sophisticated surveillance techniques and so on. Because my understanding would always be, okay, the state is there to kind of provide this function of controlling others, right?
Yeah.
So, like in principle, I would rather see private companies offer certain of these services, right?
Yeah.
Surveillance is a tricky subject, but then there's a state that can control and exert control and say this is okay, this is not okay. But if we have sort of an omni-powerful, right, an omnipotent state, then who's controlling that state? And that's
Yeah. I mean, before I move the analogy to private companies, I just wanted to ask you, do you think on more of the public state level that the surveillance and the AI that's used by the state, do you think that make us more human? And what does humanity mean? Does it mean that we do not modify our behavior despite the cameras or the AI? Or should we be more conforming because we are aware that someone is looking?
I mean, what is humanity, right? Like, I mean, I guess that's a very big question, right there. But if you kind of go back to, I would say, more like Greek philosophers almost, right? If you go back to Aristotle, he had this idea that humans um, humans should basically, right, you had a slave society back then, and back then you basically, his vision was that if you had some sort of AI, right? Because slaves is not in my definition human, right? So some people are not treated according to human rights. So it kind of goes to segregating society into different classes and kind of saying, okay, these are the thinkers and these are the slaves and so on. But in a theoretical world where you would have AI or algorithms taking over, say, all the slave work, right?
Mhm.
Then his vision was, then we could all be pursuing the good life and explore exactly what it means to be human. And I think now we're kind of a little bit confronted with, okay, maybe we're more are we really in Aristotle's good life scenario? Or are we in a 1984 Matrix type world, right? And we're kind of being controlled by algorithms and surveilled. So I think we can see, as to your question, does it modify our behavior? I think we can see, we can observe that technology obviously modifies our behavior. If you look at little children today, and if you look at, how little children behaved 10 years ago, interacting with technology, we can see, it's a different way of, of dealing, with the world. But I wouldn't say that necessarily means it makes us less human or more human. I think for me, artificial intelligence or machine learning is a tool, right? It's a toolkit, and at the end of it, we humans have to decide what we want to do with it and create the world and shape the world, and all take responsibility in doing so.
Yeah.
That the world we actually want to live in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree that AI is a tool, and with any other tool like guns, weapons of mass destruction, or even a pencil, it depends on the person's intention. It could be used for good and it can use for bad, or neutrally. It's just something that is very dependent on the intention of the person or entity using it. I wanted to move from the state level to a little bit of the more private level and talk about data. I think it's important to understand and know the state and what they're doing with AI and how they're tracking citizens, whether it's for public safety or to make sure that there's no crime. And it's interesting for sure how they balance privacy, right? But I see that on the private company level, it's very similar, right? So you have a company and they have data about you. They use this AI to influence you on a certain aspect. And you as an individual also have your privacy, right, on that site. So do you think that AI that is used privately, do you think that's good or bad? Do you think that makes us more human? Since that's the topic. And how do you feel that it would change in the next 5 years?
So maybe I'm trying to understand a little bit more about what you mean by private AI. So basically the way we individuals interact with machine learning.
Yeah, not on a state level, like not by governments or states in terms of surveillance or certain other kinds of tracking, but in terms of private companies, or a company or a private company, and how they're using AI and data, and how they're using that to learn about us, right? Machine learning, and how they make decisions about us based on what they learned, how that decision that they made impacts the individual, and whether the individual's is influenced by some kind of target marketing or message that is sent to us by the machine, right? And do you think that that's a good or bad thing? And how do you think that would change us in the next 5 years?
Okay, so maybe let me start with how do private companies use data, right? So
Yeah.
I feel I'm maybe just like an optimist, and maybe some people will say, oh, naive belief, but I see the opportunities. I see many billions of people, not having access to education, to proper healthcare. I see many companies not having access to the talent pool they want or they need. And I feel machine learning can help us to overcome these issues. So, for example, at Merantix, we have like a radiology product which helps radiologists detect breast cancer better, right? So for me, that's a case where, okay, we're trying to improve the quality of healthcare that women receive. And, for me, that would be a very positive outcome. And I think the impact on the individual, is overall very beneficial, because what we're trying to avoid is to send women who have to send home women and when they're healthy, although they have breast cancer, right? Because maybe an overworked radiologist cannot see that in a scan. So, that for me would be a use case I find very positive. Also, when we think about how can we use maybe optimize the use of resources, natural resources, right? As we're talking about a lot of these climate challenges, we have a lot of ways to optimize the use of natural resources, of optimize the energy grid and all these kind of things. So I think that's, those are overall very encouraging and positive, aspects of the technology that we can use it for. And that's kind of where my focus is. I kind of assume, that most of the people that I meet, they try to do good things, with technologies. There's always the odd man out, who have not so noble intentions. But overall, I have to say, I'm pretty optimistic in humanity that people are trying to make the world a better place by and large, right? And that's also what we've seen historically in the last few decades. People are trying to make the world a better place. However, what you're talking about, right, it goes maybe also a little bit to, what some people might see like social media manipulation, or even what you would call maybe nudging. So using the knowledge about certain knowledge about human cognition to kind of nudge them in decision making, and so on, which we've also seen, right, being exploited by some machine learning companies. And, I think there will always be these manipulative use cases, right, for machine learning. And I hope that, by educating people on how to use technology, and also, frankly, by also defining in a political arena, certain things are just not okay. We're not fine with that, right? Like we say, we're not fine with the use of handguns in certain contexts, right? We regulate this, or we regulate the way you can advertise certain substances like alcohol or tobacco, right? There's certainly room for a sensible regulation around how we should use this. But I think the opportunities will outweigh any damage that might do. And also on sort of personalizing experience, right? I think even as a user, you would not be so clear necessarily on this. So for example, you're wearing a fitness tracker, right? And maybe there's an app attached that gives you tips how to kind of optimize your behavior, right? And that might also use nudging techniques, right? To get you to exercise more, to send you a push notification, to basically increase your step count just at the right time, because an algorithm finds out, when is the optimized time of the day to send you these notifications so that you react more to them. Mm-hmm. So, I think the line can be quite fine that we tread there, right? Because in some cases we want that, mm-hmm. In others we might obviously not want it, right? So it's something we'll also have to define as society, and I think that's that's also a process that we're going to go through and kind of define a line that we're okay with.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, or do you
Yeah, it does. So I just wanted to, I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. I just wanted to understand how you feel about data. And I agree with you. I think AI can do awesome things, including help with detection of cancer and other diseases, and really help us write better, for example, and communicate better. So I personally work on a few AI projects as well. I also see the negative side of AI, how we have more cameras, and in the videos like deep fakes, right? They can be manipulated. People could be framed. So just really balancing between all the different uses and understanding them and how it really impact us as an individual, right? I mean, I think for, like some certain social media company, there is a certain consciousness, right? So I could be impacted if 10 of my friends posted about something or more weird, right? Be like fake news, like if I don't know that it is fake and I believe it, right? And then at the same time, AI also helps to fight against fake items, right? Whether it's text, video, profiles, or other technology. Again, AI is a tool. I see though that do you think AI will make us better as a human though? Like not in terms of cancer detection or more knowledgeable, I guess, right? I mean, do you think that it makes us better humans though?
I mean, I feel it will force us to think more about, what we feel makes a better human. Let me give you an example. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there are certain decisions that AI, that machine learning can facilitate, and we kind of on an ethical, right, philosophical level will have to decide, do we actually want machine learning algorithms to take this decision or not? So you could think like one example would be, for example, in this experiment that was done in the American judicial system, right, on sort of the rate of predicting sort of parole, right, a machine learning algorithm that was used in parole hearings and kind of predicting the probability to reoffend. And you could argue that actually the algorithm is better than a judge, because it kind of, in this specific case, it would grant more people parole without heightening the rate of or the probability to reoffend, right? So that's overall good. Basically means, okay, maybe some of the judges were sending some people, were not granting parole to some of the candidates that actually deserve it. You could also argue, however, okay, is this like concept of justice something that is actually deeply human? Do you actually, although you know it is a less perfect algorithm, would you rather be judged by a person or by a computer, right? That's like a legitimate question. Or even when you think about apps that are being built that can automatically apologize for you, right, to another person, like, it starts getting to the level of, okay, are there maybe some experiences that are fundamentally make this experience as a human, right? Like apologizing.
Yeah.
Is that something you really want an app for? Is that something you feel is like a fundamental human experience that you think everybody should kind of still do themselves, although it's more efficient to kind of have an algorithm do it?
I think
So
I think it doesn't depend on whether how evolved the AI is, and whether the AI is an extension or an avatar of the human. For example, if I have an AI who is an avatar who is like me and has my consciousness and soul and memories and heart, brain, and that AI apologizes to someone, and because that AI is a copy or near copy of me, it seems really real, right? However, if the AI is automated, then I don't think it counts, or should it count, right? Like,
I mean, yeah, but I mean, the question is, I guess, how you look at it. Is the result like, is the KPI, so to speak, the person who receives the apology and kind of thinks, oh, Nicole's really sorry. That's, great. We mended our relationship. Is that like, that's probably part of the KPI, right? If you think like, what is the function of an apology? And, then if you look at the other side of the sender of the apology, if I send my avatar, okay, maybe I realized, maybe there was some degree of me realizing I needed to apologize, or is that already automated? So will I, usually it's also a step in like realizing, oh, I did maybe something right or wrong, or I offended somebody, or, this was kind of not okay in this relationship. So it also has this element of self reflection, right, upon your own behavior. And the question is, can the avatar do that for you? I'm not so sure. Right, so it's and that's, I think that's the beauty of machine learning. To it's kind of pushing us right in this direction, because my feeling is we've had a very mechanistic view of humans, very task oriented, very work oriented, right? So all of a sudden you're taking away some of the tasks and we're like, oh my god, are we still humans?
what do we do?
such a simplistic way. It's like, just because my husband doesn't bring down the trash anymore doesn't mean, look, I'll get rid of him. I have a robot now. There's so many things that are highly valuable to me in everyday life. So,
well, when you really think about it, we judge, an individual by his or her word, right? And then two, by the follow-up through action. So you're telling me that AI will basically conduct the action. And so we basically will speak with and communicate with other humans or AI and basically pursue the good life. So how could we tell if, do you think that creates more honesty because AI will be doing things for someone? So the gap between say and do is very, very small. And humans become more trustworthy because of that? Or do you think it's just hard to detect who is fraudulent and who is not anymore?
So you could probably spin different scenarios on this, right? You could like go really haywire on this and like have like two really crazy science fiction movies about how this might evolve in the future.
I think we should do that.
I think exactly, and maybe we should do that in your episode, right? Have like a mini drama play out. I feel, what I still feel is that this relationship that is fundamentally human, right, still seems to be very important to fundamentally human experiences still seem to matter to us. We're still interested in face-to-face meetings. We still travel to experience things for ourselves. And there still seems to be a matter right around authenticity, right? The authenticity of an experience. That still seems to matter hugely to us, and to kind of interact with other humans in this and connect to other humans. So in that way, I feel we will still be looking for that. And we will still be looking for these authentic interactions. What you're saying is maybe it's going to become really hard to find them, to detect them among all the others. But like it's an offense and defense game, right? As you will advance in creating deep fake videos, you'll also advance on detecting them, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a one-sided game where just people who are trying to do fraud will use machine learning. They're also
Yeah.
in the defense case who will say, okay, like we're going to up our game and kind of make sure that only real footage gets sent. So I think in that sense, there's no clear answer where we'll go.
Yeah, it seems like at the same time where there's Skynet, there's also beautiful creations with AI. And I want to ask you, who is God? And who should be God, when they're making an AI?
Who is God and who should be God? Wow. So I think, like maybe this human, like who's God? That's like, if I knew that answer, right? Like I would be like, that would be great.
Well, we're talking about can AI make us more human, right? And when we talk about humanity and being human, and different levels of humanity, and whether there's lack or abundance, whether we should work or not work, how we communicate, how our actions change. We really think about God, because there's a creator, right? And if there are different states, right? And then there's different companies, there's people who are making the AI. So, when I asked you who is God, I meant who it's a governance question, right? So who should decide who governs us? Who should decide, whether we should live in a matrix or like the good life and what that means, right? So there has to be a creator, and there could be multiple creators, right? And should we be afraid of God or the gods?
No, God. So I kind of like, how should I put this? So I dislike this God simile in a way, because the creators of machine learning algorithms are not gods, right? They're clearly humans. And even if, like some of them are really smart, that doesn't,
You mean that PhDs are not God?
So, I feel that kind of sounds like a moral judgment. Right? I feel that clearly the makers and creators and experts in these fields have responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
right, for what they're creating. And I think, it's highly encouraging to see, a lot of scientists, a lot of experts signing up for AI for good, and making clear value statements as well about what they believe, they want to use the technology for and what not, what they're excluding, what they're committing not to use it for, like offensive, weapons of mass destruction and these sort of things. And I think that's highly encouraging, and that's what I would expect. I think, however, right, when we're thinking about society and what can we use things for and what not, right, there is responsibility with the makers and the experts very clearly. And then it comes down to a political decision, right? It's about, that's one of the things that we do is in a liberal democracy, come together and kind of decide, okay, where do we see consensus? There are certain interests, and let's discuss it, and let's see where do we want as a society to draw the line, what is okay and what isn't. And I think, there are also different interests to mitigate, right? Think of an insurance case where maybe an insurance company would want to leverage data on the insured people, right? Medical data, for example. And, from a shareholder's perspective, there is a legitimate interest in being able to discriminate, for example, pricing, right? From a shareholder perspective, it's a legitimate thing. And you could maybe say to CEO, hey, if you're not doing this, you're being negligent in your job, right? That could be one perspective. On the other hand, when I'm insured, I might be really afraid, of like sharing my insurance, all my healthcare data, because I might be afraid that I won't be insured anymore, or my premium will skyrocket. And I think those are, in our current legal system, right? Those are legitimate different points of view. And there's a political arena to decide, what's okay and what's not okay to do.
Okay,
And
so I feel a little bit safer because the engineers are not running the world. But I mean, on a serious note, I think for once, I think when we speak about AI and how it makes us more human, I think every single voices from different subject matter is important because it offers different perspective and point of view. Right? Because it's just not about, oh, I'm a developer, let me make an AI, but it's also about, how does it impact society? What would it do? It's ethics, it's anthropology, it's social sciences, race relation, and bias, right? Because are we making AI that reflect the bias that we have toward a certain group? Been to a lot of AI conferences, and I think it's positive that many are focusing on that. But the question is that enough? Ideally, what should it look like?
yeah, I mean, I think that's something, like that clearly depends on, what is your ultimate KPI, right? And maybe that's that's maybe that's too abstract to deal with a lot of these, for a lot of these very, concrete efforts and use cases that people are implementing. I feel obviously we want to, like on a value level, right? We kind of, I personally would not want AI to kind of increase biases, right?
Yeah.
And 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 sort of foster divide. I think that would be a huge danger, right? I mean, already now, just in the discourse and the political discourse, there's already kind of, I feel, a feeling of, okay, they're like machine learning winners and losers, right? Kind of the big tech companies that are kind of winning on this, and then kind of the average worker who's losing out on this, right? So I think that's very dangerous. Then also kind of any sort of racial, religious, right, discrimination or bias would, I think, be, hugely damaging for us. And I think, in that sense, also companies kind of have to stand up for their values, right, and kind of say, hey, this is the way we're going about it. These are the principles we want to get it right on. And there will always be something, you don't catch. But I think as a company, even, you kind of have to very much address this proactively, right? And make sure that this is incorporated in your process and kind of give your values shape also in these algorithms. And I feel, at least that's what I feel with us, that our developers and our machine learning engineers are also asking for this. Like they want to understand what we're using technology for and what's the goal. And they're quite critical on what they will work on and what not. And frankly, I think that's also very encouraging, right? It's also about everybody thinking, do I want to contribute to this? And then, of course, there are some more less conscious biases, right, that go more to the way you build models, and the underlying biases in data sets and so on. And then, there we all have to keep a very open eye on what we want to, like what we don't want to happen, right? To have any sort of biased outcomes. And we've seen that with also, some of the very prominent technology companies sort of stopping programs because they realize, okay, the data they basically input was not good enough to allow the algorithm to have to take an unbiased decision. And those are also some of the limitations we're seeing, quite frankly.
Yeah. So Nicole, we have a few minutes. I wanted to ask you, what is one wisdom that you want to share with the community on, whether it's about the topic, can AI make us more human, or your wisdom or advice could be about someone working on AI as a company or even as a consultant, or your role as an entrepreneur, economist, and data enthusiast who is optimal about tech.
Yeah, so I think my main message is like we really need to focus on the opportunities, and we need to, we need to kind of focus on machine learning as a solution, not the problem. And I think the huge focus there is, again, people and not technology. I feel we're addressing problems with this technology that are ultimately human, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to improve outputs for human in some sort of way, trying to design better products for them, trying to optimize processes, trying to detect illnesses better for them. So ultimately, we're building things around humans because they ultimately like or buy, something at the end of this. And it's all human centric. And I feel, that's kind of the very important thing, both in thinking about the products and solutions we design, and also on how we make them, right? Like, how do we, as techies, as engineers, want to work, right? Like, what are actually conditions we are very productive in, right? And that goes, towards ultimately pursuing happiness, right? As individuals, like when do I feel connected? When do I feel disconnected? When am I kind of in a good zone, to be creative and at my cognitive high? And, as a society, when do we feel we're really contributing? When do we feel we're evolving? When do we feel we're happier? And I think that's the huge opportunity. And I would really, and maybe this is a Eurocentric view, but there's always a perception that we're like a little bit behind, right? Or a little bit, maybe some would argue a lot behind on these topics. But we need to see the opportunities, and we need to just go out and chase those opportunities and make them reality.
Awesome. I'm really excited about how AI is changing us. I think in different areas of our life, even in education, with digital assistants, NLP, what you're doing with your work, well as those that detect cancer and illness, and even surveillance, right? Detecting bombs and weapons are important for public safety because we need to basically be at an airport and feel safe and be safe as we travel right around the world. I think if we can use AI for that, I think that would be super, super awesome.
Yeah, I also feel that way. I feel, there are lots of solutions. Already today, right? When you look at your devices you use and so on, like think about like taking out the machine learning components of those, you're probably like, oh my God, no. gotta get through the day.
Yeah, maps and GPS, maps with traffic data. Awesome.
Things like that, right? That produce convenience. And I feel like let's take it to the next level and really create larger social impact as well, right?
Yeah.
Larger impact for society.
Yeah, and then take out the data. I mean, the bias part.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And I mean, these are things that we're, for example, very proactively working on. Like we're in close contact also with governments and ministries and so on. And it's also an education effort, right? Like we like both sides need to understand where the other side is coming from. As a tech maker or as a regulator, you have different concerns, and I think we need to talk to each other and bridge those gaps rather than kind of increase them.
Yeah,
right?
no, I agree with you. I think collaboration is super important, and in collaboration not just between different parties, but in different areas of discipline as well, to really enable a society. I think that is ideal. It doesn't have to be utopia or be somewhere in gray. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it just should be ideal. It's like target ideal life.
Ideal life, exactly.
Nicole, I just want to thank you for your time. This is awesome, and I think I'm still thinking about some of the some of the chats that we have, and hopefully the population will think about some of the stuff that we spoke about, and when they're making their products or when they're working like on AI, right? Because that is the future.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to continuing with this conversation with you.
Yeah, we could have a part two as well. I think there's a lot of things to think about. And I'm still thinking about, wow, what is a good life? What is 1984 looks like, and some of the books, are they really a reality, or are we not forgetting that our life is also improving because of AI as well? And it's nor the good or bad. It's just, or it contains good and bad.
Again,
So
right? It's
yeah,
back to being human.
yeah. And what is humanity? What does that mean? So I think we do have a lot to think about. And thank you for your time. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.